Hello everyone, good day. So for today's video, we are going to talk about or delve with the story of Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. But first, let's start with the author's background. So the real name of Charles Dickens is actually Charles John Hotham Dickens, and he was born on February 7, 1812 in Portsmouth on the southern coast of England. He was a British author, journalist, editor, illustrator, and social commentator who wrote the beloved classics Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, and A Great Expectation. Then, his books were first published in monthly serial installments, which became a lucrative income following a childhood of abject poverty. Dickens wrote 15 novels in total, including Nicholas Nickleby, David Copperfield, and A Tale of Two Cities. And also, his writing provided a stark portrait of poor and working class people in Victorian era that helped to bring about the social change. Dickens died in June 1870 at the age of 58 and is remembered as one of the most important and influential writers of 19th century. So why is that Charles Dickens always wanted to have a reform or social change during his time? It's because during the Victorian era, there is a rapid change in industrialization, and also there's a widespread of poverty, which leads the England into significant social changes. Aside from that, there is a social injustice, or a child labor, exploitation of children, and also there is a division between the wealthy and the poor men. So that's why Dickens always trying to reform that period and maybe wanted to enhance the quality of life they had during that time. So that's why he made a lot of stories which is really related to this kind of theme. Okay, so, and moreover, this story is actually written during 1837 to 1839. He published the story, the Oliver Twist. That's why it belongs to modern English, particularly the late modern English. Okay, so moving on, let's have the short video presentation of the story Oliver Twist so that you will understand deeply how the boy managed to have the happy ending and the last part. Okay, and let's watch this one.
Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens is a novel set in 19th century Victorian England. A young orphan boy is raised in a workhouse outside of London and is eventually taken in by thieves. The novel critiques the unjust consequences of the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, which took away the rights of citizenship from paupers and assigned them to workhouses. Oliver is born in a workhouse to an unknown mother who dies in childbirth. He is first taken to a terrible orphanage, but when he is 9, he is sent back to the workhouse, where all the boys suffer harsh treatment and near starvation. One day, the boys draw straws to choose who will ask for more food. When Oliver loses, he must beg for more after his first serving of gruel, and is banished as a result. He is sent to apprentice with an undertaker named Mr. Sowerberry, but runs away after suffering further neglect and the unkindness of a boy named Noah Claypole. Noah ruthlessly taunts Oliver over his mother's death. Oliver walks towards London, but grows weak. He meets a boy named Jack Dawkins, who calls himself the Artful Dodger. The Dodger promises to take Oliver to a place where a gentleman will give him free lodging and food, and indeed delivers him to an apartment in London and an ugly old man named Fagin. Fagin is the leader of a gang of boys who are all pickpockets and thieves. After Oliver is falsely accused of stealing an old gentleman's handkerchief, Oliver is arrested. But a bookseller who witnessed the theft testifies in court that he saw another boy commit the crime. In sympathy, the old gentleman whose handkerchief was taken, Mr. Brownlow, decides to take Oliver in. Oliver is overjoyed with Mr. Brownlow. But Fagin and his co-conspirators worry Oliver will give away their hiding place. One day, as Oliver is returning books for Mr. Brownlow, a young prostitute named Nancy kidnaps Oliver and takes him back to Fagin. Next, Oliver is forced to break into a house with Bill Sikes, a vicious thief who works for Fagin. Oliver is shot by a servant, while Sikes and his partner escape, leaving Oliver in a ditch. The next day, Oliver returns to the house where the kind owner, Mrs. Maylie, and her beautiful niece Rose protect Oliver from the police and nurse him back to health. Oliver slowly recovers with the generosity of his new friends and the help of a kind doctor, Mr. Losberne. When Oliver is well enough, Mr. Losberne takes him to see Mr. Brownlow. But Mr. Brownlow has left for the West Indies. Oliver enjoys spending time with Mrs. Maylie and Rose in their country cottage. One day, however, Oliver awakens from a nightmare to find Fagin and his mysterious partner Monks staring at him through his window. Oliver raises the alarm, but the two men escape. When Nancy overhears Fagin and Monks plotting against Oliver, she decides to visit Rose and reveal her discovery. Monks is Oliver's half-brother, who wants to destroy Oliver so that he, Monks, can keep their father's whole inheritance. However, Nancy tells Rose that she will not betray Fagin or her abusive boyfriend Sikes. Mr. Brownlow returns to London from the West Indies. Rose privately tells Mr. Brownlow about Monks's plot. Mr. Brownlow and Mr. Losberne then strategize about how to find Nancy so that they can learn more about Oliver's parentage. Nancy meets with Rose and Mr. Brownlow near the London Bridge just past midnight. Fagin is suspicious of Nancy's covert actions and sends his new boy, Noah, Oliver's old nemesis, to spy on her. At the bridge, Nancy tells Rose and Mr. Brownlow what Monks looks like and how to find him. However, she still refuses to betray Fagin and Sikes. Noah, having overheard this conversation, reports back to Fagin and Sikes what he knows. Sikes, enraged at Nancy, beats her to death with his pistol. Next, Monks admits to Mr. Brownlow that he has been plotting to disinherit his half-brother, Oliver. Monks's real name is Edward Leaford. His mother burned his father's will immediately after his death in an effort to disinherit his father's mistress, Oliver's mother, Agnes. This left Oliver without any parents or financial support after Agnes died, giving birth to him. Monks, who is now known to everyone as Edward, further confesses that he paid Fagin to turn Oliver into a thief in order to destroy his life. He also gave Oliver's identity papers to Fagin for safekeeping in order to hide the truth about Oliver's true patronage and his rightful inheritance. Meanwhile, Sikes is on the run for Nancy's death. An angry mob chases him down, and he accidentally hangs himself after falling off a roof. Eventually, under pressure from Mr. Brownlow, Edward testifies under oath about how he tried to swindle Oliver out of his inheritance, but Oliver agrees that he will share the inheritance with Edward. When Edward takes his money to the New World, however, he falls into his reckless ways, goes to jail, and then dies. Soon, Fagin is arrested, tried, and sentenced to death by hanging. Mr. Brownlow and Oliver visit him in prison. Fagin eventually tells Oliver that his identity papers are hidden in a canvas bag in a hole of his chimney. Mr. Brownlow officially adopts Oliver as his own son. They live in peace and comfort close to both the Maylies and Mr. Losberne in the English countryside.
So that was quite intriguing story. I love the plot, and we witnessed the heartbreaking and inspiring story of Oliver Twist, which surely can taught us a lot of values. So now let's move on with the summary for more retention of the story. So Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens is the story of a boy born in a workhouse in 1830s England. After his mother dies, Oliver grows up in miserable conditions, facing neglect and mistreatment. He escapes to London where he is taken in by a gang of thieves led by Fagin. Despite being forced into a life of crime, Oliver's innocence remains intact. He is briefly cared for by the kind Mr. Brownlow, but the criminals recapture him and involve him in a bull girlie. And later, Oliver was taken by Mr. Brownlow, who cares for him. It is revealed that Oliver is the son of a wealthy man and has a half-brother Monks who tries to prevent Oliver from getting his inheritance. Mr. Brownlow uncovers the truth and forces Monks to hand over Oliver's rightful share. In the end, Fagin is hanged and Brownlow adopts Oliver, bringing him to live in a peaceful life in the countryside. Okay, so that's it, and now let's move on with the characters. First, of course, the main character, Oliver Twist, the protagonist, a kind-hearted orphan boy born in a workhouse who faces many challenges but remains innocent and good-natured. Second, we have the Mr. Bumble, the beadle church officer of a workhouse where Oliver is born. He is pompous and cruel, treating the orphans harshly. Next, we have Mr. Sowerberry, the undertaker to whom Oliver is apprenticed. Though he is not as brutal as others, he allows his wife and other apprentices to mistreat Oliver. And then Noah Claypole, Mr. Sowerberry's apprentice, who is jealous of Oliver and cruelly mocks his mother, which leads to Oliver running away. Okay, next we have the Jock Dawkins, the artful dodger, or also known the Dodger in the story. A clever young pickpocket who introduces Oliver to Fagin's gang. He is a street smart and part of Fagin's criminal network. And actually, Dodger just saw Oliver in the street when he escaped, and not actually escaped, ning layas siya sa katong workhouse because of the mistreatment he experienced. So that's why he met the Dodger, one of the kanang thieves ni Fagin, children thieves ni Fagin. And actually Fagin just taught them of pickpocketing. Next one, we have the Fagin, a career criminal who runs a gang of child thieves and manipulates orphans in doing his dirty work. He is a key antagonist in the story. Yeah, he is really the main antagonist in the story and the main root of evil there, because he controls all the orphan children to do such a wrongdoings, like being a thief. Next, we have Bill Sikes, and as far as I know, he is also known as William Sikes, a violent criminal and robber associated with Fagin. He forces Oliver into a bull girlie and later murders his own lover Nancy. Yeah, and why did Bill Sikes murder Nancy? It's because at the following action of the story, Nancy reveals all the things that should be heard or should be mahibawaan ni Mr. Brownlow, Brownlow is actually the grandfather of Oliver Twist in the story. And then something like Nancy is ni traitor of the gang, since Nancy is also part of the gang, because Nancy felt sorry for Oliver experiencing all those mistreatment, which also she had experienced when she was young, where Fagin controlled her, taking advantage of her innocence, goodness during those times. That's why she wanted to help Oliver Twist as well to lift him from that kind of situation. So moving on, Nancy, of course, Bill Sykes' lover and a member of Faggin's gang. Despite her criminal life, she is compassionate and tries to help Oliver escape from the gang. Next, Mr. Brownlow, a kind and wealthy gentleman who takes Oliver in after he is wrongfully accused of theft. He later helps reveal Oliver's true parentage. Monks, Edward Leaford, Oliver's half-brother, who conspires to ruin Oliver's chances of inheriting their father's fortune by hiding the truth of Oliver's parentage. Agnes Fleming, Oliver's mother, who died shortly after giving birth to him. Her story is revealed later in the novel, showing she had a relationship with Mr. Leaford, Oliver's father. Mr. Leaford, Oliver's father, who had a relationship with Agnes Fleming and fathered both Monks and Oliver. His death sets the stage for the inheritance conflict. Next, we have Mrs. Bedouin, Mr. Brownlow's kind-hearted housekeeper. She cares for Oliver while he is recovering at Brownlow's house after falling ill. She is compassionate and plays a motherly role in Oliver's life during his stay with Mr. Brownlow. And lastly, second to the last, we have Mrs. Corney, the matron of the workhouse where Oliver is born. She later married Mr. Bumble, but their marriage is unhappy. Mrs. Corney is portrayed as self-serving and unkind, showing little compassion for the poor people under her care. And lastly, we have Charlotte. Charlotte, the Sowerberry's maid and Noah Claypole's girlfriend. She is complicit in Noah's mistreatment of Oliver and looks down on him, supporting Noah in his bullying behavior. And moving on with the themes. First, we have the struggle between good and evil. Why is that? It's because it's very evident in the story that Oliver is very good in nature. And despite having those bad influences, like especially Fagin and Bill Sykes, they are antagonists in the story and they shows very mistreatment and bad behavior towards Oliver. And despite having these experiences, Oliver remains the same. And at the end of the story, he's still good. And it doesn't matter with the environment where he was raised or where he experienced. Next, we have the social justice. So, of course, social justice is highlights there. It's because during those 19th century in England, there's harsh realities where exposing the cruelty of the workhouse system, child labor, and how society often mistreated orphans and the vulnerable. Through Oliver's experiences, Dickens criticizes how the wealthy and powerful neglect or exploit the poor. The novel argues that kindness and compassion can make significant difference in a world filled with inequality and suffering. And lastly, of course, the identity and the family. So right after Oliver was born, of course, there's a lack of identity already because right after he was born, his mother died. And of course, throughout his life journey, he wanted to have a good family, and he wanted to know who is his father, who is his relatives. And of course, he later found out that this is Mr. Brownlow was actually his grandfather. And also, what else? So Oliver's quest to discover his true identity and find a loving family is the central to the story. He constantly searching for belonging and is ultimately rewarded when his true family and heritage are revealed, showing the importance of family connections and support. So that's it for the theme. Let's move on with the cultural context. So for the cultural context, first one we have the poor laws. So first, let me tell you about the scenarios or happenings during the 19th century in England. So during this time, I've already told you that this is the period of industrialization, or also called the Industrial Revolution. Widespread of poverty, mistreatment, exploitation, injustice, and etc. Okay, so at this time, many people moved from rural areas to cities in search of work, leading to overcrowded of urban areas, poverty, and harsh living conditions. The novel highlights these issues particularly through the portrayal of poor, orphans, and workhouse system. First, we have the poor laws. So why is it there's a poor laws and the story? So, which governed how the poor were treated there. Workhouses like the one Oliver is born in, or institutions where the impoverished were sent to live and work in exchange for basic needs. However, they were notorious for being cruel and inhumane, offering little more than prison-like existence. Dickens criticizes the system by showing how it neglects and abuses the vulnerable, particularly children like Oliver. And that was Fagin's wrongdoing as well. Yes, because he take advantage of Oliver's goodness, innocence at that time. That's why it led Oliver being a thief, and that's vulnerability of being a child, being an innocent. So next one we have the class divisions. So it is very evident in the story that there is a gap between the poor and wealthy men. Wealthy men have this privilege and authority to do all the things they wanted to do. And for the poor men, they don't have. And actually, it's still evident today. However, it was lessened. Yes. And so, yeah, it's different characters. The criminals pageant to wealthy benefactors like Mr. Brownlow illustrate how society viewed and treated people based on their classes. The criminal underworld depicted in the novel shows how many poor people were forced into illegal activities to survive. And lastly, of course, we have the child labor and exploitation of children. Yeah, the same what Oliver experienced when he was still in Fagin's territory. Yes, and which was widespread during this period. Of course, children were often put to work in dangerous and unhealthy conditions. Dickens exposes this reality through Oliver's mistreatment and criminal exploitation of children by Fagin. And I guess that would be all for my report today, and hopefully you learned something from this story. Thank you for listening and have a good day. Goodbye.